I'll be honest, it was incredibly tempting to think about moving in here and living the rest of my life offline, but I couldn't keep away. I'm back. After taking a much needed week off to stare at puffins and read a bunch of books in Newfoundland, I am now back. I am a year older and I am ready to talk to you about the stuff that has already pissed me off. Now we are going to talk about this, but first I'm going to quickly talk about the cabinet announcements and a fundraising email I got while I was away. But I actually went down a whole rabbit hole on this and learned something really unsettling about the state of our media, so please stick around because I think it's actually incredibly important. I've noticed that when I talk about this too early in my videos, they often end up suppressed by the algorithm, so we're going to put a pin in this and come back to it in the hopes that people will actually see this. Fingers crossed. Anyways, right before I logged off, I mentioned that the Conservatives were doing a weird kind of almost election denial in their fundraising emails. They basically started fundraising around these judicial recounts that are happening in a couple ridings, claiming that the Liberals were trying to tip the scales, which is literally impossible for any party to do when it comes to recounts, because not only are these recounts overseen by a judge, that's why it's called a judicial recount, but they're also counting ballots that have already been cast. They are recounting those ballots, so you can't get people to go back in time and change their vote just because you raise enough money. But then when I was on vacation, because the media had reported on the extremely concerning language within these fundraising emails, the Conservatives sent another one saying this. Yeah, that they are under attack by the media. And now it's not just the Liberals, but also their media allies that are apparently fighting tooth and nail to tip the scales when it comes to recounts. Just like no matter how much money they get for their recount fight fund, the Conservatives can't actually influence the results of any recount because it is literally just a recounting of ballots that have already been cast that is overseen by a judge. The Liberals and their media allies, whatever that means, also can't tip the scales in the results. So this is just not only incorrect and stupid, it's also incredibly irresponsible and dangerous and putting ideas in people's heads about the fairness of our elections that are deeply problematic. So cut it out. Okay, so that's one thing that annoyed me. Now let's talk about the cabinet. While I was on vacation last week, Mark Carney announced his cabinet. A lot of people have already discussed these appointments. A lot of them also aren't that interesting, but there were a few standout things that I really wanted to mention. So I'll start off by mentioning one thing I was happy to see, which was that he brought back the women and gender equality portfolio that he had axed in his tiny wartime cabinet, and that really concerned people at the time. But he didn't bring back the disability ministry, which is extremely problematic because a part of the attack that we're seeing right now are on DEIA. The A stands for accessibility. People who are living with disabilities are facing huge attacks on their fundamental rights, and I just think it's really sending the wrong signal to get rid of a ministry tasked with addressing that at this particular point in time, or at any time, but especially right now. But hey, at least we have a minister for AI. I could be convinced of the usefulness of this portfolio if it was focused on regulating and reining in AI, being realistic about the issues with energy consumption, environmental impacts from the technology, and the way it's being deployed to impact workers' rights, women's rights, or anyone who doesn't want their work stolen, like artists and writers and people whose likeness is being used in really disgusting ways. Now, the Liberal platform does say that they plan to address the issue of non-consensual AI-generated deepfakes. But the platform also extolled the virtues of AI and talked about pushing for more widespread adoption of the technology. And Carney has even said that he wants to use a lot more of it in our federal government to try to drive efficiencies. So the active embrace of AI is something that I'm finding to be a bit of a red flag that I'm going to keep an eye on from Mark Carney, because I think there's a lot of snake oil in that industry, and I will be watching to see what ends up happening with this ministry. I'm also going to be watching to see how Gregor Robertson moves forward on the housing file. I think that he definitely made a few comments already that are a little bit concerning and suggest he might not fully grasp the problematic nature of the financialization of the housing market, but we'll be watching. We'll see what happens next, but I am sad that Nate Erskine-Smith was booted out of that portfolio because he has proven himself to be a seriously critical thinker who's not afraid to say when he is wrong about something or to change his mind on issues when presented with evidence. So that's too bad because he's the kind of politician I think we need more of. So yeah. But overall, these roles have just been announced, so a lot of this is going to be a wait and see. Maybe there's going to be some new stars, maybe there's going to be some standout action, maybe some people are really going to screw the pooch. I will be keeping you posted as we actually see them implement and move forward on the policies that have been promised. All right, now I want to talk to you about something that I went down a whole rabbit hole around today, which is related to this atrocious headline. First, a little context. Just yesterday, Canada, Britain, and France came out with a warning for Israel. In their joint statement, the three leaders said, quote, "The Israeli government's denial of essential humanitarian assistance to the civilian population is unacceptable and risks breaching international humanitarian law." Risks? I'm pretty sure it already violates international humanitarian law to use starvation as a tool of war and to withhold aid from civilians in a form of collective punishment, but I digress. The joint letter goes on to say that they oppose any attempt to expand settlements in the West Bank and that they, quote, "will not hesitate to take further action, including targeted sanctions." It adds, quote, "We strongly oppose the expansion of Israel's military operations in Gaza. The level of human suffering in Gaza is intolerable." Meanwhile, the UN is warning that 14,000 babies could die in Gaza in the next 48 hours under the Israeli aid blockade. Despite the abject cruelty and atrocities at play, this is how the National Post wrote about this situation. IDF claps back against Anita Anand's criticism of the Gaza war. Claps back? Are you kidding me? What is wrong with you? But then I noticed something interesting. The author. That guy, Rob Roberts, yeah, he's the editor-in-chief of the National Post. And he doesn't write articles that often. I think he's only written like 3 this year. 2 of them have been in like the last few days. And I found out why. He is being generously hosted in Israel right now by this group called the Exigent Foundation, alongside Juno News' Kian Bexte and the former reporter for True North, Harrison Faulkner, who you may remember from his extremely jovial interview with the Proud Boys founder Gavin McInnes, among other deeply problematic reports. Anyways, the editor-in-chief actually discloses in this article that he is on a trip sponsored by the Exigent Foundation. And so I'm like, who the hell is this? Turns out it was founded by Larry Marr and Vivian Berkovici. Vivian was Harper's former ambassador to Israel. She also worked for an Israeli intelligence firm. And they say at the moment there is a dovetailing of the priorities of the progressive left and extreme Islamism. And their mission is to empower with knowledge. In addition to Vivian and Larry, you've also got Georgianne and Paul. Those are all of the listed team members. Here's how Vivian tweets about Muslims who are praying. Meanwhile, Georgianne is sharing posts like this, and this. Oh, and it turns out that this isn't the only media trip that their group has paid for. After Sharon Nadeem, who works as a producer, pointed out this initial image to me and sent me in the direction of the group's LinkedIn, I realized several prominent Canadian right-wing columnists like Jen Gerson, Adam Ziva, Warren Kinsella, Brian Passafume, they were all brought on these trips. The co-founder of the foundation also claimed in a LinkedIn post that excellent work published as a result of the mission came from Brian Lilly and Terry Glavin, so it sure sounds like they went on these trips too. Here are where those links lead. I just think that maybe we should be slightly concerned that the editor-in-chief of one of Canada's largest newspapers, along with several right-wing columnists from various outlets, have gone on this paid-for trip to Israel by this group that half of its members have posted very concerning things online about people who are racialized or Muslim. I really feel this explains a lot about how our columnist class writes about what's happening in Palestine, and I think it's really, really concerning. Anyways, it's good to be back. I definitely missed you guys. And hopefully tomorrow's news isn't as unpleasant. Until then, what do you think of all this?